Well, hello there. It is Wednesday, August 21st. I am Jeff Blair. This is Blair and Barker. Mr. Barker, again, here in spirit today. But there you go. I am told that we may have a Barker sighting on Friday. So I would take that to mean that the porch painting is almost finished. At any rate, the Toronto Blue Jays will wrap up their 3-game series with the Cincinnati Reds tonight at the Rogers Center, coming off a 10-3 win last night in which the Jays hit 5 home runs. Just about everybody was involved in the offense. Jose Barrios, and I guess if you're John Schneider, this is probably what you want to see from your 3 everyday or your 3 starting pitchers going into next year, Bassett, Barrios, and Gossman. You probably want to see more of what you saw last night. Jose Barrios was terrific. Changed things up a great deal through way more fastballs than normal, way fewer slurves than normal. Really good changeup. Part of that, you'd like to think, was game planning on the part of the Blue Jays. The Reds are not a very good off-speed hitting team, and I think they probably expected to see a steady diet of slurves. But also, Jose Barrios pitching to the scoreboard. And what I mean by that is giving an early lead, just being really aggressive, and pitching like a guy who knew he had a 9-run lead or an 8-run lead and eventually a 7-run lead. It was a quick game, lots of offense, lots going on. For a team playing out the stretch, you take a few more of those games, to say the least. The lineup for today's game is out. Vladdy Jr. is back at third base for the second consecutive game. And I think we're probably at the point now where we can probably stop making note of the games when he plays at third base. It's pretty clear from what John Schneider has said, and indeed as Dan Schulman spoke yesterday. It's pretty clear that as the Blue Jays endeavor to deepen their lineup in the offseason, there is a very real possibility that Vladdy Jr. ends up moving positions to third base. Now, obviously, it's a fluid situation. And the bottom line for the Blue Jays going in the offseason is they need to get a couple of thumpers in here. And whatever position they play, make it work. Right? If you can get... I don't think the Blue Jays can afford anymore. I certainly don't think this front office can afford anymore to go, yeah, he'd look good in our lineup, but, we've already got a first base. No. If he improves your lineup without, detracting spectacularly from defense, but if he improves your lineup, get the guy in here and make it work. And if part of that is having Vladdy be your everyday third baseman, know that, 1, he's doing so willingly. And 2, and I mentioned this with Schulman yesterday, with Dan, I found it really comforting, I guess is the word, revealing, I guess, to hear Chris Bassett say that not only does Vladdy like playing third base, but Chris Bassett, who, again, as we know, this is a guy who is, to put it politely, a details guy. This is a guy who, to put it politely, is hypersensitive to his surroundings. If he's okay with it, and he seemed to basically say, hey, Vladdy at third base, he likes it, he's okay, I'm okay with it. My conclusion is if Chris Bassett is okay with it and Vladdy's okay with it and John Schneider's okay with it, then fine. Just let's let it be and be prepared for the possibility of Vladdy Jr. playing third base the rest of the way. And I've come around to it. I didn't like it originally, but I think maybe more than anything else, it shows just how cynical this front office has how they. I think it reveals for me, anyhow, just how I assume whenever anything is done with this team now, it's because somebody's just getting cute. Play Vladdy at third base just because. We want versatility. We want everybody to play every position. And I was not a fan of that because I just couldn't. Whatever. I like stability, right? I especially like stability in the infield, my corners. I love stability in the corners. Anyhow. So I was not thrilled with that idea. But now that it seems as if there is a plan here, and it seems as if everybody's aware of that plan, Godspeed, Vladdy. Make every play at third base, have at it. And by all means, please, 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 keep hitting. Keep doing what you were doing. Yariel Rodriguez makes a start for the Blue Jays tonight and continuing his development in the 2024 season. Nick Martinez will start for the Cincinnati Reds. Nick Martinez coming off a 7-1 loss to the Kansas City Royals, but before that, he was really good. 15 scoreless innings, had won 4 consecutive decisions, hadn't given up walks in 24 innings, or had given up no walks in 24 innings. Nick Martinez on the mound for the Reds tonight. And again, it is a 7:07 first pitch of the rubber match. You can hear it right here on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. You can watch it right here on Sportsnet, and I'll be along following the game with Blue Jays talk. We have a big show ahead for you today, a busy show ahead for you today. Chris Leroux, our Blue Jays radio analyst, will join us from the Rogers Center. Jeff Passan, MLB insider, one of our favorites, will be along at 5. Travis Sawchik, he is the national MLB writer with The Score. And as I consistently tell people, the folks there do really good work. Travis Sawchik among them. He will join us at 4:30 as well. And he had just a fascinating, at least for me, fascinating look at Jackson Holliday and the Orioles. Jackson Holliday being sent down, Jackson Holliday coming back, and how the Baltimore Orioles attempted to reset Jackson Holliday. And we'll take a deeper dive into the Orioles, who, as we speak right now, let me just call this up. The Orioles, are they playing today? They were losing to the Mets the last I saw. Do we have? I don't have a final score here. But anyhow, the Orioles lost 4-3 to the New York Mets. The Orioles are 74-54, and they're, I believe now, 9-12 this month. Don't hold me to that. I think it's 9-12, 9-11, something like that. But Sir Anthony Dominguez taking the loss today, and there's we focus a lot on the Blue Jays, but I can tell you there is a great deal of angst right now in Baltimore about the Orioles. They have hit the skids at not a particularly opportune time. We'll talk to Travis about that. Also want to talk about Justin Verlander. He made his first start today since, I believe it was June 5th. He made his first start today for the Houston Astros. And his line was, the Astros are currently losing 3 runs, 5 innings, 4 hits, 6 Ks, 1 walk for Justin Verlander. And again, the Houston Astros, who at one point this year were 10 games back of the Seattle Mariners. I mean, they've laid waste to that division. They've laid waste to the Mariners. And to the point where Jerry Dipoto, the GM of the Mariners, has come out and apologized for the team's season, which I'm sure will go over well. Considering it's August 21st and you're not out of it altogether. But there we are. So Travis Sawchik will join us to talk that. We'll also talk about the future of Bo Bichette, Vladdy's next contract, and the Joey Votto situation. And I know Ben Nicholson-Smith addressed this on Sportsnet.ca. Look, I mean, I just assumed that the Jays were letting Joey Votto use their facilities to get ready for this series, to be honest. especially when the Jays fell out of the race. I thought, okay, you've got to give the fans something, give them a little, something to celebrate. This would have been the perfect opportunity. But I mean, I'm told that Joey Votto's calling the shot here. And I will credit Joey Votto for this. Joey Votto doesn't think he's ready, so Joey Votto's not up here. And the numbers at AAA would suggest he's not ready. And again, I haven't been able to figure out this whole Joey Votto thing. I'm a bit like Barker, just from Joey Votto's point of view. I don't, unless he wants to play next year, I just don't. I just don't know what to make of it. So anyhow, we'll have a lot to talk about with Travis Sawchik, Jeff Passan, and Chris Leroux. The World Baseball Classic is back. No surprise, it will return in 2026. Canada will play in Pool A with Puerto Rico, Cuba, Panama, and a qualifier. Those games will be held in San Juan, Puerto Rico on March 6th to 11th. Greg Hamilton is the director of national teams with Baseball Canada, and he joins us on Blair and Barker. Greg, as always, appreciate your time today. Look, no surprise. Obviously, the World Baseball Classic will return. We all expected that. But I wanted to ask you this because I remember the first WBC, and at the time, it was pitched as this thing that was going to increase the international footprint of the game, but also it was viewed as something that was going to help maybe create a little bit more labor peace in the game, because it is the company that was formed to run this is actually a joint venture between Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball Players Association. And I was an early buyer of this concept. I really liked it. I tell people the first WBC being in LA and San Diego was remarkable. Watching Japan play, watching Korea play, watching the emotion of those games, of course, watching the Canadians in Arizona. Before we talk about 2026 in particular, Greg, are you happy where the WBC is? Are you surprised it's gotten to the point it's gotten to?
Definitely happy. I mean, it had challenges, obviously, on the front end, right? I mean, you're trying to get buy-in from clubs and player development people, which are obviously pretty impactful in decision-making for players. The stars that are established, they can kind of make their own calls on it. But, a country like ours where you need sort of depth players and players that are on the verge or just establishing major league careers and major league presence, you have to have buy-in from clubs, and they have to know that the people that ultimately employ them are comfortable with them participating. So I think it's kind of got traction to the point where there's a lot more of that. I think early on it was challenging because there was a reluctance on the part of maybe some clubs or player development people to allow players to go and potentially risk injury and those sorts of things. And certainly with younger players who are trying to establish a footprint and get themselves established with a big league club, it was a hard decision. So, I mean, they were supportive, but I think it's got a lot more traction. And obviously 2 years out with it being announced this time around, I think it gives everybody a really good chance to kind of, prepare for it.
It was funny because I remember the first year, one of the things that, and I can't remember if it was Alex Anthopoulos. I can't remember who I was talking to. It was some baseball executive, but one of the points that person made was, it's going to be interesting when a U.S.-based team, because they're all, other than the Canadian teams, they're U.S.-based teams, but, for example, pick a team. When a U.S.-based team is asked to have three of its players from the Dominican Republic leave camp to go and play for the Dominican Republic, right? I mean, you ask, we need a guy to go and play for the U.S., teams are, well, what are you going to do? Nationalism, et cetera, et cetera. And that was one of the things that I think people were interested in, was how would the teams react to those situations. But I also saw very quickly, Greg, and I'm sure you did as well, like the players bought into this really right from the start, especially the Dominican players, the Puerto Rican players, and the Canadian players. They bought in right away, didn't they?
They did, absolutely. I mean, you kind of create some natural rivalries there with the countries that you mentioned, and I think that's sort of built out. I mean, just look at the last one, right? You couldn't have scripted it any better with that Obviously we'd have loved to have been in that script, but I mean, at the end with Ohtani and Trout and that narrative, I think it just kind of really took it over the top, and that's kind of what you're looking for, right? I mean, it's that, those that have done it, we've always believed in, wearing the country's colors across the jersey and playing for your country and the passion that comes with it and the enthusiasm and whatnot. But it took a little while to kind of really, catch. And I think it's there now. And I think with them announcing 2 years out, there's a lot of time for everybody to prepare for it. I mean, there's not surprises in terms of, probably the asks that are going to come. I think clubs can forecast, minor league players, that may be, 2 years down the road ready and the asks that are going to come, and they can everybody can sort of plan for it. Advisors, agents, clubs, player development people, the players themselves, and it gives you a chance to kind of communicate with those players. And, obviously that has to be done, formally at a certain time and appropriately, but I think everybody knows it's happening and everybody can talk it up. And, that momentum is there, which, with the time and not being sort of late asks, I think everybody can prepare a lot better.
Obviously injuries and health and things of that nature are going to play a role when 2026 rolls around. But from where we are right now, like it's been noticeable, I think, to a lot of us who follow baseball in this country that, in addition to elite level players, there's also a depth now to Canadian-born baseball players that we may not have seen. In the past. As you sort of look ahead to 2026, and again, I apologize because I know you got a lot on your plate before then. But are there young players in particular who we should maybe keep an eye on over these next few years, and maybe be prepared to see bigger roles in 2026? Now that the Vottos and people like that have moved on or will have moved on.
Yeah, I think certainly so. I mean, we kind of gave it a glimpse last go around here with obviously the Bo Nailers and the Julians that kind of jumped onto the stage and the Caseys, and Tyler Black is a guy that injury didn't kind of allow it to happen last time around, but certainly a guy that I think at that time will be coming into a prime. And I think some of those players we kind of gave everybody a little bit of a glimpse of the last time around, Denzel Clark, and that's, for us, kind of the future. And those guys are really coming into their prime years. And obviously the big names that are still, going to be in the middle of their careers, in the Freemans. And, that's going to be a key. And obviously, hopefully this time around it lines up for John. It works. He always wants to play. He's every time you watch him play, you realize why you want to have a character in the makeup. So, I think, Tyler O'Neill, again, did it last time and, should be in a prime of a career there as well. And, as it always does, it comes down to, pitching. And for us, we don't have the depth, so we've got to get the guys that, hopefully we'll be able to get next time around with the Sorokas and, Quantrill played last time, but Pavetta and Paxton and, Tyon and all those guys in the back end with Brash and hopefully Romano this time around. And, I think if we can line that up, we got a chance to be pretty competitive.
Early days, obviously, but the manager's role, Ernie's managed, he's been a loyal servant, a good soldier for Canada baseball for some time. Any ideas who might manage the team? Again, I apologize. I know we're 2 years down the road and a lot can happen, but right now, do you have names in mind?
Yeah, I mean, Ernie is our manager up until, this point in time, and certainly the person we'd love to have going forward, and we kind of have to see how everything lines up with him and whatnot, but he's done a terrific job for us, and this is kind of a quick hitter type tournament, so you got to come in with instant respect and an understanding of the roster, and Ernie's been terrific over the years, so I don't see why we'd make a change there, but we're not planning on doing it, but we haven't spoken with Ernie in terms of where he is and what he'll want to do at that time, but I think he will want to do it again, and we'd certainly love to have him.
Last question, Greg, and I'll let you run after this. There's also talk, and I guess this comes up after every Olympic cycle, but particularly with the Olympics being in LA, there's some talk now about Major League Baseball shutting down the season or trying to figure out a way to get Major League players involved in baseball, get baseball back on the schedule in LA. what are you hearing? Because I would think that obviously this would have obviously Baseball Canada, the Canadian Olympic Committee would have to be involved in this. Are you hearing anything about that at all? And realistically, how much lead-in time do you think it would require to get teams ready for an Olympic competition?
Well, I think that's a lot of that's going to come down, obviously, to Major League Baseball, the Players Association, obviously ownership, right? When you talk about shutting seasons down, which is certainly at a completely different level than myself and our Baseball Canada would kind of drive it. We would kind of react to that, and obviously we'd love to have our Major League players participating. And when you talk to major leaguers, they definitely would love to go to the Olympics. I think, kind of like the WBC, it's unique in its own right, but the Olympics are the Olympics. And I think all players, can't speak for everybody, but I mean, if they had the opportunity to do it, they'd love to. You never say if not, it never will, but I think if it's ever going to happen, this is probably the perfect circumstance, right? In Los Angeles, media center. Obviously the center, kind of the universe on the baseball side of things in terms of, where you'd like to have it if possible. And I think it would be a natural marriage for Major League Baseball to consider and see whether or not they could make that happen. But a lot of things would have to obviously line up.
Greg, as always, you've been very generous with your time. We appreciate it. Thanks so much for this, and travel safely, my friend. Be well.
Thanks, Jeff. My pleasure.
Greg Hamilton is Director of National Teams with Baseball Canada. Again, the World Baseball Classic will return in 2026, as Greg said. Plenty of lead-in time to prepare for it. Canada will play in Pool A with Puerto Rico, Cuba, Panama, and a qualifier. And those games will be held in San Juan, Puerto Rico from March 6th to 11th, 2026. And, we'll see. It'll be intriguing to keep an eye on some of the Canadian players currently in the minors, see how they develop, see how they emerge, and see whether or not they end up playing a role with the Canadian team at the World Baseball Classic. But, again, I'm really happy to see how this has developed. I give Major League Baseball and the Players Association enormous credit for sticking with this, for not paying attention to some of the naysayers. And I think we reached I found it anyhow, as someone who covered this story initially, I think we reached kind of an interesting point in the last WBC. Edwin Diaz was injured, if you remember, during a celebration on the mound. And obviously the New York Mets weren't happy. I don't think any baseball fan is happy anytime a player gets hurt. But despite that unhappiness and disappointment, you didn't hear people take it to the next level and say that this is a reflection or this is a reason why we shouldn't have this anymore, right? If that had happened 2 WBCs ago or 3 WBCs ago, I can guarantee you would have heard it. And I think nothing speaks to the acceptance and the development of the WBC more than a fact that a star player can get hurt and people, again, nobody's happy, but people aren't saying you need to shut down the whole tournament because a guy got hurt. People are going, well, you know what? It's a competitive game. You take your chances. And, again, getting injured during a celebration, that's another part of it. But I can guarantee you if that happened a few WBCs ago, all you would hear is this is the worst case scenario. This is a nightmare scenario. This is why we can't do this. And now it's part of the baseball calendar. It's accepted. The risks are accepted by the players. And I will get back to what I said with Greg Hamilton, or to Greg Hamilton. If you look at the teams originally in the first World Baseball Classic, there was less buy-in from American-born players. There was more buy-in from the Mexican players, the Dominican players, the Venezuelan players, the Puerto Rican players, the Canadian players. Players from Asia, there was immediate buy-in from them. The U.S. less so. And it took a while, I think, for the Americans to realize that, one, this wasn't going away, and two, you know what? It really doesn't look good if we keep getting our ass kicked in our own tournament. So that, I think, explained in some ways how this is advanced. But again, I cannot stress this enough. The buy-in from the players, the buy-in from different countries is absolutely the key reason that this thing has gotten to where it's gotten. I've always told people, we like to talk about hockey in Canada. If you've ever been around the Dominican Republic team in the World Baseball Classic, or now there's a whole political aspect with the Venezuelan team, but Team Venezuela, those guys take it seriously. Like, that is to them the equivalent of hockey to Canadians, and that's why this thing has become such a success. Travis Sawchik is the national MLB writer with The Score. He's going to join us next. It's Blair without Barker, but still on Sportsnet 590, The Fan and Sportsnet. All right, we will be joined by Jeff Passan, MLB insider with ESPN, at the top of the hour. Chris Leroux, our Blue Jays radio analyst, will be along at 5:30. Really enjoyed last night going out to the ballpark, sitting in the booth with Chris and Ben Shulman, and watching Luke Maile pitch 2 innings of relief for the Cincinnati Reds in that 10-3 loss to the Jays. Again, you know how I feel if you've listened to this show about position players pitching. I think it's an abomination. I just think it shouldn't be allowed. And if you're going to allow it, then I think there ought to be a penalty for the team, such as not being able, as losing a pitcher for the rest of the series or something like that. I'm not a fan of it. But watching last night's game, which had a little bit of everything. Of course, the Jays won 10-3 with a crap ton of home runs and Jose Barrios pitching. Last night, and it's August 20th, and the Jays are, August 21st now, but it was August 20th, and the Jays are out of it. I will admit I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed watching Luke Maile throw a 41-mile-an-hour pitch. And I really enjoyed watching Luke Maile give up a long fly ball and just as soon as the ball was hit, just walk to the dugout. Like he walking towards the Reds dugout like a guy who knew the ball was going to get caught when everybody else in the stadium was wondering if it was going to go out. Anyhow, it was great theater. Hopefully I don't have to see it again. Travis Sawchik is the national MLB writer with The Score. He joins us on Blair and Barker. Travis, as always, it's great to talk to you. Thanks so much for taking time out to speak to us today. Look, as we came on air, the New York Mets just finished beating the Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles, I think, are now 9-12, 9-11 this month. They've got one of the worst bullpens in baseball over the past 2 months. They have not been a great team. They made some moves at the trade deadline. And I want to talk in a minute about your article earlier this month, which I found really interesting on Jackson Holliday. But right now I just kind of want to focus on the Orioles. Did they not do enough at the deadline? Should they have gone in more for Mason Miller or Tariq Skubal?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think they were one of those teams with kind of coin flip odds of securing a playoff bye. The Yankees were another club, the Guardians and Twins in the AL Central. These were teams with a lot of, I would say, in high leverage positions at the deadline. And the Orioles did make a number of moves, and I think Zach Eflin, I really like that addition. But I think you can question whether they acquired enough high-impact talent. And I agree, like Mason Miller, I'm sure the price tag would have been extremely high. But, I mean, I thought the A's should have been motivated to move him, given how far away they are from contention. And a team like the Orioles, I mean, he could be a monster in the postseason. And the bullpen issues they've had, especially with Kimbrel going through one of his flare-ups he seems to have every year, he would have been a great addition. And I think the other interesting thing is maybe they didn't add enough impact, and maybe they just added too much. They made too many moves of sort of middling significance. I saw Dan O'Dowd, the former GM on MLB Network, talking about his experience and his then manager of the Rockies, Clint Hurdle, saying, you have to be careful about not making moves just to make them at the deadline because it just doesn't impact one player maybe in a position, and it has this trickle-down effect to a number of folks in the clubhouse. And you could see a Cedric Mullins, potentially thinking about, oh, maybe I'm just a platoon player now after some of these moves. And O'Dowd noted that, players will start, they might have been more team-centric, but then they start thinking about themselves, especially if they're, on an expiring deal. So to me, it was like a delicate balance. They had to strike, and I'm not sure they hit it, but I still think they're, an exceptional organization and a great team, and they're probably just going through something of a lull. But to your point, I do think they would have benefited from a greater impact piece at the deadline.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder with the Orioles too. Look, I mean, they are loaded with prospects. They've got a lot of depth, and not just prospects. I mean, they've got a lot of gilt-edged prospects, if you want to call it that. But I think we might have had Rock Kabutka on earlier this year. We had somebody on with the Orioles talking about, this is nice. All these young players are great, but you're kind of getting to the point where you have to start managing your window of opportunity because they're not going to be, Gunnar Henderson's not going to be cheap much longer. Adley Rutschman's not going to be cheap much longer. Yes, you've got all these young players coming in. That's great. That's wonderful. But you do have to manage your window, don't you? Because if you don't, I mean, this team's a perfect example. You wake up one day and all of a sudden Bo and Vladdy are 18 months away from being free agents and you've won nothing.
Yeah, I do think there are rare organizations and leadership groups that can, have a 10-year window of continued excellence, but it's unusual. And I do think now the Orioles window is open now. And I think one lesson, and maybe this is too informed from my fan experience growing up in Cleveland as a kid, but I think you have to be careful about bleeding away prospect treasure for middling pieces. Mm-hmm. I think about this goes way back, but Brian Giles for Ricardo Rincon, the situational lefty, and Giles went from Cleveland to the Pirates, and he became this 1,000 OPS hitter, this great performer. And the Guardians the Indians back then, they didn't quite meet the asking price on a Pedro Martinez who went out onto the Red Sox and was a different faker. So I think, just even going back to the Mason Miller, Skubal, Crochet, those type of impact pieces. I think even though the price tags are higher, so given the impact they could make, especially some of those players on multiple years, I think it's a better use of prospect treasure if they're not going to help your immediate club, to go after an impact piece instead of making smaller bets. That's my own philosophical belief, and maybe it's too experienced, maybe it's too influenced just on some anecdotal piece of evidence. But I do. Miguel Cabrera going to the Tigers from the Marlins. I mean, that was a huge, that was a big prospect treasure trade at that time. But he went on to, they didn't win the World Series, but Cabrera was part of a team that went there. And I just think there are these bits of evidence. Yelich with the Brewers, and he's had back issues and whatnot, but he's still been an excellent player. I think it makes sense to go after the higher impact players, especially if you have club control over them for multiple seasons.
Your article in Jackson Holiday a while back, a couple of weeks ago, about how the Orioles, after they called him up, sent him down to the minors and really did a deep dive and did a reset with him, and it involved a lot of things. It involved his ability to get to the high fastball and limiting or changing, altering, whatever word you want to describe his leg kick. Now he's come back up. I mean, we saw him in Toronto, and I think he's hit 3 of his 5 home runs against the Blue Jays. So he came back up. He made an impact. Offensively, the numbers, I think what he's hitting 183 so far. I'm not entirely certain that they're what the Orioles wanted to see, but it reaches, or it touches on something you've spoken about and you've written about as well, and that is just the gap we see now between pitching at AAA and pitching at the major league level, and just how much value there might be, for a young guy staying at AAA all year, coming up here, and the pitching is vastly. I mean, the pitching is just so much better than it's ever been, and it's also probably weaker than it's ever been at AAA. And then the other thing that I know you've mentioned, and we've seen here because of the experience of Davis Schneider and Spencer Horwitz and all these guys that have come up from the minors, the fact that the challenge system isn't in play here. I mean, Leo Jimenez has talked about this, right? The challenge system isn't in play in the majors, so it's kind of changed the way he's had to approach hitting mentally. All of this, is this something that should it be a concern for baseball? Is it going to alter the way organizations develop players? Where do you see this going?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I know just in speaking with MLB executives and some hitting coaches, they all believe it's never been more difficult to make that jump as a prospect from the upper levels of the minor leagues to the major leagues, and the numbers bear that out. As we looked at in that piece for The Score a few weeks back, the performance gap between the minor league hitting, major league hitting, it's just the gap has never been wider, and it's again goes back to a number of factors. At the audit, they're dealing with two different strike zones, as you pointed out, and that's one factor. The pitching talent, as we know, is never been greater at the major league level. The average fastball is 94.4 miles an hour right now, which is another record. Each winter, pitchers seem to come back with a new pitch, a new designer breaking ball. And then there's a scouting element, too, that I hear about. And it's just the feedback's immediate. If you find a hole, like with Jackson Holliday, opponents realized he had this issue catching up the high fastball, and they immediately realized that, and they kept pounding and pounding that. And after 2 weeks, the Orioles realized, we have to reset this kid. And I do like how they went about it. They gave him a good message of, it wasn't trying to better his past AAA minor league numbers. It was to go back and work on one specific deficit. And they gave him a drill package, and with all their high-tech and low-tech tools, they went about training that, teaching it, and he came back with much better initial success. So, yeah, the gap is wide, but there are some tools, at the player development level that can help hitters. But I don't know. It's never been wider. It's more difficult. It's difficult to see how that's going to change. But I do think eventually the best hitters will find their level, will reach their performance level at the major leagues. It just might be a little more rocky in getting there. And I also think historically it's never been, it might be more difficult. It's never been easy. And even look at the Mike Trouts of the world, even the best players often go through some initial struggles. It just might be a little more pronounced given a number of factors.
I know Brandon Weil of The Score wrote an article sort of taking a look at where Vladdy's contract may go. He's a free agent at the end of next year. I think everybody in this city is hoping that the Jays take a serious run at signing him. It really hasn't happened yet. But, it's funny because we had Jeff Passan on a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about, the pay scale for first baseman. Now, Bryce Harper's got a huge contract. That's kind of skewed because he was an outfielder / first baseman, right? Freddie Freeman, first baseman. But unless I'm wrong, I'm looking at salaries of third baseman, right? And it seems as if the salaries for third baseman have risen maybe a little more than first baseman. The reason I'm mentioning that is because Vladdy is playing third base tonight, second day in a row. It's now pretty much an open. It's open knowledge that one of the things that may happen in the offseason for the Blue Jays to address their issues with their lineup is that Vladdy may end up moving to third base. Could that make it more complicated to get Vladdy signed? I don't know how many guys have undergone a position shift in the last year of their arbitration eligibility, right? And the year before free agency. Could that be a complicating factor, do you think?
It could, just because of the positional adjustment. All these teams are using the WAR calculations or something internally like them. And of course, if you can handle third base over first, that could be a big deal. I mean, that could be like an extra. I'm trying to think what the run positional adjustment is, but it's considerable. It might be close to a win above replacement level if he could fit there. But
that's about $8 million. That could be about $8 million, basically,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. So I think that's probably in the ballpark. Now we can dispute how accurate some of these defensive values are in these formulas. But yeah, it would, if Vladdy could do it, it would help him and arguably help the team that he's under contract to, whoever that might be in the future. I do think the big thing though is just the bat. I mean, if I'm the Blue Jays, I'm less concerned about if he can play third base and are we getting this hitter we've seen recently, because this is the kind of player who is, I think Baseball America gave him like 80 hit, 80 power grades. And when he was coming up, and you just don't see that. And we saw in 2021, Vladdy at the much higher level that he's been closer to recently. So I'd be much more concerned about what is this the bat? Is this bat sustainable? And is this the kind of cornerstone, cleanup, middle of the order bat that from the Blue Jays or another club that I'm comfortable investing in? And then, whether any first baseman should be a $300 million player or not. If they hit like Bryce Harper, if they hit like Vlad has been lately, I think that's reasonable. And over the lifetime of a 10-year contract, the dollars in revenues go up, and it becomes less of an outlier number too. So yeah, it certainly wouldn't hurt his value to pick up third base, unless there's some negative ramifications and it affecting his hitting ability. But for me, I'm more concerned about if I'm investing in this player, can he just sustain this? Because I think most folks believe that there's more in there than we've seen in recent seasons, and I think we're seeing that lately.
We're going into September here soon. In 9 days, it's August. Obviously, for the Blue Jays, they're not in a playoff race. All this makes sense. But we're also seeing a lot of additions, right? In Toronto, Will Wagner, Spencer Horwitz. I wouldn't even call that an addition anymore. Joey Loperfido, Jonathan Clase is probably going to be up at some point. Travis has, look, we used to always talk about don't read too much into what you see from a player in September. Don't read too much into what you see from a player in the first month of the season as well, right? Has analytics made it a little easier to figure out what is real and what isn't real in September?
I think so, at least to a degree. We at least now have an understanding of the underlying skills. We know we're not just relying on the eye test. If a player has above average exit velocity, if they hit the ball harder than most major leaguers, we understand the strike zone better. So even if we see a poor batting average for a month, the underlying numbers might suggest this player was unlucky and his skill levels actually above the major league average in some areas. So this is especially true on the pitching side. I mean, this is one reason it's harder to make that leap, as Cody Ash with the Orioles told me, is it's the pitch models now. Teams don't need multiple months or years to understand if a pitching prospect at the upper levels can pitch in the major leagues. They know exactly velocity and movement, some deception measures with release points and whatnot. They know if this is a major league caliber pitcher or not, and they're going to send them up immediately so they're not wasting bullets in the minor leagues. And I think that's also in small samples at the major league level too. We have a better understanding of this, if X player has a legitimate chance to be a long-term contributor. So I do think September baseball, even though the Jays are out of it, I do think this is still a meaningful glimpse of possible, future contributors and, their actions at the deadline. This is not a team that wants to go through a long rebuild. They're taking the other option, which is to do a shallower retooling effort and look at some of these players in the system or newly acquired and see if they can help immediately. So, I think there are things that can be gleaned and learned from the close of the season for the Jays.
Travis, really good of you to join us today. Thanks so much, my friend. Terrific stuff as always. Travel safely and be well.
Thank you. Anytime.
Take care. It's Travis Sawchik, national MLB writer with The Score. You can follow him on Twitter at Travis_Sawchik. Does really, 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 really good work. And very thought-provoking articles as well. The article on Jackson Holiday and sort of what the Orioles attempted to do with him is fascinating. And we're going to be joined by Jeff Passan at 5:00. And if you remember, we had Passan on a couple of weeks ago. I guess I was on holidays last week, so it'd probably be 2 weeks ago. And we talked about what Vladdy may get in terms of free agency on an annual average basis, right? And one of the points Passan made is, look, first basemen just don't get paid as much. Vladdy's not going to get $30 million a year. The only $30 million first baseman right now is Bryce Harper, and we know that is, partly because Bryce Harper was and I'm sorry, he's not $30 million. He's $27.5 million. Pardon me. I think the annual average value works out to $30 million. But anyhow, you get my point. Bryce Harper got his contract, and when he got his contract, he was an outfielder. Now he's moved to first base. So if you look at other than him, Freddie Freeman is the highest paid first baseman at $27 million. You'll see where I'm going with this. This is a list of MLB's highest paid first baseman in 2024. All right. Harper, 27.5, Freeman, 27, Goldschmidt, 26, Olsen, 22, Alonso, 20.5. Vladdy is sixth at $19.5 million. So that is among first basemen in Major League. I think there was one of the LA writers tweeted out today that since signing Anthony Rendon to a contract that this year pays him $38.6 million, the Angels have had 14 different starting third basemen. It's just insane. Anyhow, contracts for first baseman: Anthony Rendon, 38.6. Nolan Arenado, 35. Bregman, 30.5. Devers, 29.3. Bryant, 28. Moncada, 24.8. Austin Riley, 21. Vladdy Jr. as a third baseman, would be the eighth highest paid third baseman compared to the sixth highest paid third baseman. And what I'm getting at here, and this is why I asked Travis about this, is if Vladdy does move to third base next year, and again, this isn't carved in stone, but unfortunately, 2024 is carved in stone. So this is why we're talking about stuff like this. If Vladdy ends up as a third baseman next year because the Jays, their best way of addressing their offensive issues is to have somebody else play first base, it could be a complicating factor when it comes to his free agency, because what are you looking at? Are you looking at a 27-year-old first baseman, or are you looking at a 27-year-old third baseman? And Travis Sawchik is right. Obviously, the bad is the bad is the bad is the bad. But I think there's a positional value involved in here as well. So this is another little wrinkle, right? This is another little wrinkle with Vladdy. I want to explore that more with Jeff Passan. Chris Leroux joins us as well, and we'll listen into manager John Schneider's pregame today and see if anything earth-shattering is discussed. So that's it for the next hour. Don't go anywhere. It's Blair and Barker on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Sportsnet. All right, we'll be joined by Chris Leroux. He is our Blue Jays radio analyst, bottom of the hour, live from the Rogers Center. Tonight, the Jays and the Reds wrapping up their three-game series. Yariel Rodriguez on the mound for the Blue Jays. Nick Martinez for the Reds. Nick Martinez has been in a pretty decent run of late, although his last start against Kansas City was not, shall we say, spectacular. But nonetheless, it is a rubber match of a three-game series. The Jays coming off a 10-3 win last night. Season-high 5 home runs for the Blue Jays. Terrific pitching from Jose Barrios. Lots and lots and lots of fun stuff going on in the game, including Luke Maile tossing 2 innings of relief for the Cincinnati Reds. So we will be be looking forward to tonight's game. See if the Jays win tonight. Would give them 60 wins for the year. Would raise their record to 1667. And for the Reds, who are still kind of in the fringes of the wild card race, obviously there's more at stake for them than the Blue Jays. But after last night's loss, you would think that the Reds will be loaded. I was going to say loaded for bear, but that doesn't even really make any sense, does it? This is some quality or not so quality ragging of the puck while we wait for Jeff Passan. And now that we have Jeff Passan, I don't have to do it anymore. How you doing, Passan?
Good, buddy. Welcome back.
It's good to be back by myself. They're keeping me away from the sharp objects, but things seem to be going okay. No CRTC violations yet. No hyphenated cuss words, so we're doing well.
Give it some time.
That is true. It is only Wednesday. Hey, so we had you on a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about how much money Vladdy might make, and you were making very, as you usually do, you were making very good points about the pay scale at first base, et cetera, et cetera. Now Vladdy's starting at third base tonight for the second consecutive night. John Schneider has said, we're going to see this pretty regularly the rest of the year. Probably not. You're not going to see a 50-50 split for Vladdy between first and third. But it seems, Jeff, as if it's now okay to have a conversation about Vladdy possibly being at third base next year if the best way for the Blue Jays to address their offensive issues is to go out and, sign a free agent first baseman. The reason I'm throwing that out there is, the pay scale for third base, even leaving aside Anthony Rendon's that silly deal, seems to be a position where a player can make a little more money than at first base, and I'm wondering if this could potentially be a complicating factor for Vladdy and for the Blue Jays. If they do start negotiating a contract that buys out a free agent year or free agent years.
Here's the thing about vacation. Here's the thing about vacation, Jeff. You missed it when the next week I came back and said that I was told by multiple sources that I'm an idiot and that Vladdy is going to go and get $300 million regardless of whether he's at first base or not.
Who told you that? I mean, it can't be anybody in this station. It can't be anybody in this station whose word whose word you'd pay attention to. Because if I wasn't on, I don't know.
No. This was people in the game of baseball.
Oh, screw them. What do they know?
This is including one person who's hoping that Vladimir Guerrero reaches free agency and will gladly give him $300+ million.
All right, so, let's reset this. Okay. Yes, I didn't watch my show when I was off air. I put my hands.
That's okay. Honestly, I give you credit. That's very healthy. Like, if your name is on it and bad things are happening, there are plenty of people out there who would be obsessive about it. But you, Jeff Blair, you put you take actual vacation. I give you credit for that. My vacation is quite often sitting there with my phone and trying not to look at it. Yours, I don't even want to know what you were doing not paying attention, but it was working.
It was. It really was. All right, so I'm just going to reset the whole damn thing then. And Vladdy could make more money as a third baseman, could he not?
I mean, I suppose it depends on how competent he is over at third base. Like, let's just look at what he's done at third base in his limited time there. He was not good, right? He was kind of objectively pretty bad, and that's when he was 20. The body hasn't gotten better. The lateral movement is not exceptional. I hope, for Vladimir Guerrero's sake, that he can play third base. I think that, I guess, if you're in a world where Rafael Devers is playing third base and where other guys have shown drastic improvement, when Nolan Arenado got drafted, there were a lot of questions. Is he going to stick at third base? He became one of the best defensive third basemen of all time. When Josh Young got drafted by the Rangers, questions, does he have the glove to stay at third base? He's been exceptional since he's been in the big leagues. And one of my favorite memories of the 2023 World Series is watching Josh Young play defense. Like, he was so good that series. So it is possible. I just don't know that it's likely with Vlad. And to me, this is one of those things where it ends up he's going to take the vast majority of his reps at first base when it's all said and done. But I hope I'm wrong on this one, because number one, it's great for him personally. Number two, it opens a lot more opportunity for the Blue Jays to go out and find another bat who they could put in at first base.
Yeah, I found this whole thing to be like, look, when it first came out that the Jays were going to use him at third base, I just thought this is another example of this organization outthinking itself. I mean, they do have a habit of doing stuff that blows up in their faces, right?
Yeah.
So I just kind of rolled my eyes.
Yeah.
But, the fact is, I mean, Vladdy does like playing third. Chris Bassett, who, was on the Chris Rose rotation earlier this week and was talking about Vladdy and said, I got to tell you, I mean, he may not be the worst third baseman I've ever seen. Chris Bassett's a guy who worries about. I mean, he worries about everything. Dome closed, weather, meal. I mean, he, as my friend Mr. Barker says, he is a very needy pitcher. And I've not had anybody say that Chris Bassett isn't needy. But yeah, I just find this, I don't know how many players would go into the final year before free agency and switch positions willingly. I mean, I guess it'd all have to be willingly, because you're not going to, drag him to third base, stick an anchor there and say, stay until you leave. I find it to be an intriguing situation for a guy who is on the verge of making a crap ton of money. Maybe he just feels that, my bat's going to get me the money, and, wherever they stick me is fine.
Yeah, I vaguely recall the last time that this happened, Manny Machado. The year before he reached free agency, I believe he switched from third base to shortstop. Now, I say, like, my memory may be failing me here, but I think the year before J.J. Hardy, who was frankly the only reason why Manny Machado was playing third base in the first place, he came up through the minor leagues as a shortstop. Everyone projected him to be a shortstop, but Hardy was so good at short that Machado moved over to third. I think J.J. Hardy might have gotten hurt the year before, and Manny played a little shortstop, and then that final year transitioned to shortstop and played there for the Orioles and Dodgers, but wound up going back to third base for the Padres because he was really good there. So going on one side, from one position on the left side of the infield to the other is a whole lot different than going from the right side of the infield to the left side. But I get why on the cusp of free agency you want to do everything you can to maximize value. It's because of the way that teams treat guys in free agency, Jeff. They look for any little thing possible to nitpick. And with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., if he is hitting the way he's hitting, you cannot nitpick him offensively. There's nothing you can say about his offensive game. He is hitting for power. He is hitting for average. He is taking walks. He's going gap to gap. He doesn't strike out. Like, everything about his offensive game right now is elite. What they will say is that, he may be young, which he is, and he may have a great offensive game, which he does, but he's a first baseman. So how much value can he actually have?
Right.
And look, if he makes himself into a representative third baseman, then he's going to go out there and have a free agency with next to no dings against him, which is a very, very difficult thing to do and something you find so extremely rarely, to the point where even with Juan Soto, they're going to ding him for his defense because his outfield defense isn't very good, but he's still going to get $500+ million.
The Orioles lost to the Mets today. They're, I think, 9-12 in this month. 9-12, 9-11, something like that. Their bullpen is awful. It's not very good.
Yep.
It's August 21st, but should we start to wonder, despite all the moves they made, Jeff, at the deadline, whether or not they spent too much time kind of filling in the margins and not enough time trying to bring in a more impactful pitcher, especially, or is that just that's horrible hindsight?
Jeff, I was wondering it then.
Right.
Like I understand Trevor Rogers has control, and you're going to have him there for a few years, and maybe you can make him into something. But as wide open as the American League is right now, and as wide open as the National League is right now, and as wide open as the entire sport is at this moment, Jeff, why would you not try to grab the bull by the horns and be the best team? I don't get it. I do not get it. If you can get Tarek Skubal, you go get Tarek Skubal, especially when you have as much in your system as the Orioles do. And if they're going to lose Corbin Burns this offseason, I think that's a very realistic possibility because he is going to get paid, and the Orioles, outside of Chris Davis, have never gone out and spent any money on anyone in free agency. Then you don't want to waste this wonderful core that you've got because you don't have enough starting pitching. And so I like getting Sir Anthony Dominguez. I think that was a good thing to help at least stabilize their bullpen. The Rogers deal didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and the lack of the big swing didn't either, because here we are and just everybody toward the top of the game is the same right now. Every team has flaws. The Yankees, I'm not sure if they have the best record in baseball still. Like they're up there. The Yankees, I have questions about their offense, their starters, and their bullpen. The Orioles, I have questions about their starters to some extent and definitely their bullpen. Cleveland, questions about their starters and their offense. Minnesota, questions about their starters. Kansas City, questions about their bullpen and to some extent their offense. Like you go team by team by team, every one of them, the Astros, the Mariners, like all the American League contenders, and you can do the same thing in the National League. It's just one sea of very good. There's no excellent team in baseball right now, and I'm not sure if that's going to lead to a great October or a boring October.
Yeah, the one thing I would say is, and we saw a bit of it today with the Astros getting Justin Verlander back, and Justin Verlander throwing 5 innings. And I know that ESPN, they've got, I don't know if it's, I apologize, I don't know if it's Bradford or it's Buster or David or yourself, but just reading an article before he came on about, and I'd forgotten about this, about returning players. Like there's some guys returning that could really swing the playoffs. I'm sorry, it's Alden Gonzalez. There are guys returning who could really play a role in the playoffs, aren't there? Like huge roles.
Yeah, I mean, I think Carlos Correa might be at the top of that list. I don't know if you realize this, but since I think like mid-May, the Minnesota Twins are the best team in baseball.
Yeah.
It's such an under the radar thing, but
because we're so focused on the Guardians in that division, right? I mean, that's the thing. And look, they've been really good, and the Royals have been super surprising, right? So they've gotten some of that shine as well. But when the Twins are healthy and they have Royce Lewis and Carlos Correa and the rest of that lineup, when Byron Buxton is healthy, I know asking for all of those guys to be healthy at the same time is like asking for Vladimir Guerrero to win a Gold Glove at third base. But still, like one can dream, right? Yep.
And losing Joe Ryan, who's out with a shoulder injury, really hurts the Twins, because I've been thinking like they're going to be my World Series pick in the American League. It's a weird thing to say because one of those teams that has flown under the radar so much, but that's how wide open things are, man. I mean, we've addressed this on this show before. There might not be a team that wins 96 or 97 games this year. We haven't seen that in almost 20 years.
No, you pointed that out.
Baseball right now is staggering.
Yeah, you pointed that out on X, just the run differential and the fact that we may not have a 100. I mean, I think it's going to be hard to have. I don't know if you can have a 100-win team. I mean, I'm just looking at the standings right now. I don't even know if it's possible. I mean, I guess the Yankees have 73 wins, and that is remarkable. And It's a good thing for. I mean, I think it's a good thing for baseball. Is it not?
I do. You know what though? I can make arguments on both sides. I think a 105 win team is a good thing for baseball because it gives everyone something to chase.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 95, 96, 97 across the board is great because it makes the postseason even more of a question mark. There, in other sports, you can't always predict what the postseason is going to be. Hockey, especially, like it's one of the reasons the Stanley Cup playoffs are so awesome. It's because you see eights beating ones. It doesn't surprise you when a 7 beats a 2. In the NFL, doesn't quite work that way. In the NBA, it tends to be pretty chalky. In baseball, dude, I have no idea going into this postseason who should be favorite. Yeah. No clue, because it just depends who shows up and is playing well at that particular time. And baseball is the most unpredictable game because you just can't look at what they've been doing lately and have that suggest to you that it's going to continue because at the snap of fingers, it can go away.
Yeah, and I keep looking at that, the Central Division and in the AL West, and I think, for the longest time, people have kind of looked at the Central as, that's the Central. But boy, the Central's going to be there's going to be a bit of a war in the next 4 or 5 years.
It's going to be nasty.
Oh, it's going to be filthy.
Yes, it is. Yep, because Detroit's going to be really good too, and the White Sox may lose 125 games this year. I don't know if it's going to be a whole lot better next year.
Right, but Cleveland, Kansas City, Minnesota, I don't see those organizations falling off the cliff anytime soon. So it's going to be something. Hey, before we let you go, what the hell's going on with St. Louis, the Cardinals? Now I see that Nolan Gorman has been optioned, I believe, or sent down and demoted to AAA. What's going on there with St. Louis?
No, Nolan Gorman got optioned today. Jordan Walker got optioned, I believe it was yesterday.
And he was only up. He was just brought up recently, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was up for 10 days.
Yeah,
and he was fine in those 10 days, but apparently not fine enough. And this is the continuation. The Cardinals, Jeff, are on pace to have back-to-back losing seasons for the first time in like 65 years.
Yeah.
This is an organization that has been the model of consistency and excellence. And to see them at this place right now where they are A, old, and B, can't really seem to develop young guys, and C, when they let those young guys go, they go and turn into stars or at least like good big league everyday players elsewhere. It's a bad spot for the Cardinals right now. Our buddy Bernie Miklasz took out a blowtorch this morning and wrote about the organization. That was before they demoted Gorman, who's got 19 home runs this year, by the way. When Bernie's like taking it to you, you screwed up.
Yeah.
And so I think there are going to be changes there this offseason. Whether it's John Mozeliak not coming back as president of baseball operations, Oliver Marmol not coming back as the manager, maybe both. It seems like there needs to be change there because the natives in St. Louis are restless. And Jeff, when Cardinals fans aren't going to games, it's a bad sign. That place, more than any, has been as consistent to sell out as any stadium in the big leagues for decades now.
Yeah, I mean, it really is one of the game's special franchises. Jeff, we're going to let you scoot, man. Appreciate you doing this, as always. Be well.
Pleasure's mine, buddy. Look forward to next week when the band's back together.
Absolutely. Take care. It's Jeff Passan, MLB insider with ESPN. The reason, I felt all year, and I think Barker and I talked about this as well, when I looked at the Cardinals and I looked at the Jays, it's like I've always kind of felt that there was some sort of mesh there in terms of a trade, in terms of potential moves, in terms of position players, because it seems as if, and again, I'm not intimately familiar with what is going on with the Cardinals, but it just seems as if they are two organizations that need to make a significant change to the guts of their team. Cardinals maybe more so than the Blue Jays. But, as someone who started covering baseball and grew up watching and listening to the Cardinals, we always told about the Cardinals. The Cardinals did everything right. The Cardinals developed players right. The Cardinals treated players right. The Cardinals did all sorts of stuff with their minor league system that was ahead of time. They were tremendous at making the proper, correct read on their own players. The Cardinal way was the two things I remember: the Cardinal way, and when Earl Weaver ran the Orioles, the Orioles had a way of doing business. Well, just ask Buck Martinez about it sometime. They had a way of doing business that was just, that's the way proper teams handled themselves. Same thing with the St. Louis Cardinals. And Jeff's right. St. Louis is a great sports market. It's a great baseball city. There's a reason a lot of players retire after their careers. There's a reason a lot of players retire in that city. They love you in St. Louis. Right? If you do anything in St. Louis, you are loved. And I wouldn't say it's a non-critical city, but Cardinals fans have sort of always had an ability to overlook a person's flaws and accept their strengths as something of value. And if that's changed in St. Louis, that is it's something that, for a baseball fan of a certain age, just make you scratch your head, as my friend Barker would say. Chris Leroux is our Blue Jays radio analyst on Sportsnet. He and Ben will have the call of the game tonight, 7:07 first pitch. The Reds and Jays will play the rubber match of their 3-game series. Chris Leroux joins us next. We'll hear from the skipper, John Schneider, as well. It's Blair and Barker on Sportsnet 590 The Fan, the Sportsnet Radio Network, and Sportsnet. We're about an hour and a half away from the first pitch of the Rogers Center. The rubber match of this 3-game series against the Cincinnati Reds, Yariel Rodriguez. Starting pitcher for the Blue Jays, Nick Martinez. For the Cincinnati Reds, Chris Leroux will join us in a few minutes over the line from the Rogers Center. He and Ben Shulman will have the call of the game tonight on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Of course, the game's also, as always, available on Sportsnet TV. John Schneider, the manager of the Blue Jays, just completed his managerial availability. A couple of newsy items. First, Bo Bichette is, as you know, rehabbing from his calf injury in Florida. He's expected to ramp up his running program and, subsequent to that, baseball activities program, and he may do that by rejoining the Blue Jays this weekend. He's not going to be in the lineup, obviously, but he's going to rejoin the Blue Jays this weekend to continue his progression with the major league team. So that is certainly a good thing. John Schneider has said that the Blue Jays want to get Bo back. They want to see him finish the year healthy. He won't say this, but given the assumption that seems to be out there that Bo Bichette might end up being traded in the offseason, I've got to think the front office would like Bo to show teams that he is healthy and fully rehab. The Jays, as you've probably noticed after the trade deadline, have found themselves with a much more balanced collection of hitters, lefties, righties. And John Schneider was asked today about how he envisions this lineup going down the stretch with those lefty and right-handed hitters. And he was also asked about the starting rotation. You probably know by now that the Jays have a doubleheader on Monday in Boston. It's actually the continuation of a game that was rained out, followed by the regularly scheduled game. So obviously that is a complicating factor when it comes to the starting rotation. This was John Schneider talking about, one, his lineup, and two, how he plans on getting the starting rotation through the next couple of weeks.
What differences, if any, do you sense in terms of what having more left-handers available has made to how some of your righties may get pitched, or whether it has an impact on what the other team's doing?
It's always nice to have options. It's always nice to be, balanced, both left and right, I think. You try to match it up with the starter, like Martinez today with the changeup. He's kind of a reverse splits guy. But it is nice to kind of set your lineup where you're kind of going right, left. You don't have really defined spots for anyone out of the bullpen to come in and really run through that lineup. So at least from a platoon advantage standpoint. So it's nice. And I think on days like today, it's nice to have a couple lefties on the bench too.
When you said it'll depend with that doubleheader on Yariel and Jose, you mean how Jose pitches Sunday, right? Because he's still going Sunday.
Yeah, we may go. We're going to push everyone back a day, so we're gonna go TBD tomorrow instead of Bassett, and push Jose back a day. Let the cat out of the bag there. Sorry.
Is that Bassett getting backed up, or everybody?
Everybody. Yeah, I think everyone, just kind of with 17 in a row and the doubleheader on Monday, just trying to really get guys an extra day, so everyone will be back one.
So is Yarbrough potential for tomorrow if he doesn't throw today?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be.
This is John Schneider, manager of the Toronto Blue Jays. And, Dan Shulman mentioned this yesterday. If you look at the Jays' schedule, because of that doubleheader, they've got – the games are going to come fast and furious. Once you get into September, I believe Danny said there's 4 or 5 off days. So the management of the starting rotation will take care of itself in September. It's just these next 17 days or so that the Jays are going to have to do a little bit of tinkering. And I would think that as you heard John Schneider say, everybody's going to be pushed back a day. I mean, I think this opens the possibility. Obviously, Ryan Yarbrough would be likely to start a game. Tomorrow's game is now TBD. I think Ryan Yarbrough, would be potentially start a game. And I still think there's a way forward where we may see Jake Bloss up. And I know Dan's talked about this. Maybe see him up for one of those games against the Red Sox as a 27th man, because we do know that the Blue Jays do want to see him before the end of the year in the major leagues. So there you go. That is the update from the manager, John Schneider. Let's bring in Chris Leroux, our Blue Jays radio analyst with Sportsnet. Chris, thanks so much for joining us today. I don't think there's any surprise in anything John Schneider said, but as a former pitcher, what are you looking for? We'll start with Yariel Rodriguez tonight. What are you looking for from him tonight and down the stretch? And then I want to talk about the established guys. Like, what are the Jays and what do you need to see from Barrios, Gausman, and Bassett down the stretch? But let's start with Yariel tonight.
Well, I think I need to preface that with, let's remember that Yariel is a true rookie, right? I've said that a few times this year, and I think people tend to forget that he is a true rookie. This is a guy that is pitching in his first major league season, and he's pitched pretty well. I know the win-loss record really isn't great at 1-5, but everything else, yes, he's had his ups and downs. He's had some tough starts. The velo has been down. The velo has been good, and then it's been back down again. But just because he signed that big contract, the $35 million contract, doesn't mean he's not going to have the same ups and downs, the same feelings, the same nerves as somebody who has never pitched in the big leagues before. Pitching in Japan and pitching in Major League Baseball are completely different. I did both. I experienced the nerves in both, and they're very, very different. I truly believe that the best competition in the entire world is in Major League Baseball, and I know that Yariel is starting to learn that, if not already. So let's not forget that this is his first year. This guy has a sub-4 ERA as a true rookie. Pretty incredible to think about. But I think in answer to your question, I think I just want to see him throw more strikes. He's been really erratic with the fastball. We see him rush a lot. We see him try to overthrow, and that kind of goes hand in hand with being a rookie, being a true rookie, trying to do too much, seeing the names on the back of the jerseys, being intimidated by the Aaron Judges. And I think that once he calms down, once he realizes that, hey, my stuff plays here at the big league level, my stuff is good enough to get these guys out, I think that's when you'll start to see him stop rushing. You'll start to see him. He really tries to throw his breaking stuff, almost those breaking balls that he pulls off glove side, and you'll see him throw back foot to lefties a lot, bouncing breaking balls. And I think that's just from him trying to do too much, not trusting his stuff. But once he starts pounding the strike zone down and getting ahead with that first strike, I think that really calms him down, and that's what I want to see for the next 6 weeks or so. If I'm Ross Atkins, if I'm going to feel comfortable with Yariel Rodriguez in my starting rotation next year, with aspirations of making it to the World Series in 2025, I need to see him just be calm out there, not try to do too much, and act like you're confident in your pitches. And I think that's what John Schneider's waiting to see. That's what I'm waiting to see. He's been very up and down, but like I said, he is a true rookie. He's a guy that is experiencing all those feels, those first feels in the big leagues. So let's not forget that.
What the other guys, the veterans? What do you a guy like we saw Jose Barrios last night, throw fewer slurves than I expected, than the Reds expected. Now, he was given an early lead. I mean, it was a perfect position. If you were going to choose a night to be aggressive with your fastball, if you're Jose Barrios, I mean, last night went basically, it was almost a perfect scenario for him. But what will be a good August and September for Barrios, Gossman, and Bassett? You're obviously good health. You want them to get to the finish line. You want them to be healthy. But beyond that, what would be a good final 6 weeks for those guys?
Well, I think once you get to that age, once you get to that established position in the major leagues, especially on a team like this with a ton of guys that are kind of just starting to feel it out, trying to get those numbers on the back of your baseball card a little bit better. I feel like you kind of hit the nail on the head. If I had that contract, if I was established in the big leagues at 33, 34, 35, I think I'm just trying to stay healthy. I think I'm trying to stay healthy so I can produce next year. I'm trying to throw strikes. I'm trying to get my guys through the game. I don't think there's really a secret sauce when it comes to established guys trying to get through kind of a lost season. You just want to get to the finish line healthy. You still want to have success, of course. Every single professional athlete wants to have success, whether they're 20 or whether they're 35. They still have there's still money to be made in this game, and everybody has that ego. Everybody has that drive to have success. But I mean, it's pretty simple. Just stay healthy. If Jose Barrios can pound the bottom of the strike zone like he did last night with the fastball, and in September 29th, I believe, is the last game against Miami. If everybody is healthy on September 29th, I think that's a win. And I know that's not an exciting answer, but I truly feel that 2025 is going to be a big year. I know Ross Atkins is going to spend some money in the offseason. Mark Shapiro is going to spend some money. Ownership is going to spend some money. I'm excited to see what they do, and I really want a healthy Jose Barrios, a healthy Chris Bassett, and a healthy Kevin Gausman to be a part of that.
Yeah, and I think that's, there's such a heavy to-do list with this team that as you look ahead to next year, one of the things you can count on if they're all healthy is, you're going to have some knowns coming back. Mm-hmm. Yes, they're all going to be a year older. We all know what that means. But at least you could theoretically pencil those three in and be okay with it. If Yariel Rodriguez finishes strong, that's great, because next year, because of his contract, you can't option him next year. So, you want him in the team. And then Bowden, hell, you may have found money with Bowden Francis. Never mind Bloss or somebody else. But But if you can get into if you like Bloss, if you can go into the offseason knowing you've got 6 guys that you're kind of sort of possibly okay with starting, well, then now you can go out and go after the impactful middle of the order bat, right? Or the other catcher.
Mean, of course, there's a lot of needs, but I think that the biggest thing that people are forgetting, especially from this year, this lost season, quote unquote, is you essentially played the entire season without Bo Bichette. He's a bona fide superstar, and let's not forget that he's a guy that can not easily, but who can hit 300 with 20 home runs. And where is that in the lineup? It's not there. It's not there. There is zero Bo Bichette in this lineup, whether he was hurt or whether he was just underperforming. Let's not forget that's going to be if he doesn't get traded. Like I've heard rumblings. I truly don't believe that the Blue Jays should trade Bo Bichette. But if he's on this roster next year, I truly believe that he will be the guy that you've seen in 2021, 22, and 23. 24 is just an outlier. He's a baseball player. He knows the game. He's going to figure out what he was doing wrong, whether he was trying to do too much. I've said this a couple times this season. He's a guy that has never had failure in his entire life. The entirety of his life, he's never experienced failure. So now that he did, he doesn't know how to get himself out of that hole. And once he figures out a way to get himself out of that hole, he'll be the Bo Bichette that we've seen earlier on in his career. But think about that. This guy has never had failure. High school, little league, minor leagues, big leagues. That's absurd. And then to finally feel those feelings of failure, a lot of guys don't know how to get out of that rut. I know I struggled with it, and a lot of guys, obviously, we see Davis Schneider struggling to get out of that rut, really trying to put too much pressure on themselves, trying to figure. You see the wheels spinning, and we saw that with Bo. He was pretty miserable for the better part of this season, and that's not Bo being miserable. He's not a miserable guy. He's just really struggling with the failure, and he doesn't know how to get himself out of that hole. And like I said, once he gets himself out of that hole, he's going to be that 300 hitter with 20 to 25 home runs and play average defense at shortstop. And I'm telling you, he is going to be the biggest addition. I think we forget about him. It's almost like the fans have written him off, and which is kind of frustrating for me, because you have to remember that this guy is an absolute stud. Once he figures it out, he'll be the Bo Bichette that he was before.
What's going through Davis Schneider's mind right now, do you think?
Oh, boy.
You know, I mean, he can't beg, borrow, or steal a hit. Again, it's Will Wagner's probably not going to keep, finish the year the way he started it. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, he's scuffling. He's not hitting lefties. My friend Mr. Barker says, hey, if you're going to be a bench guy and a right-handed hitter, one thing you got to crush lefties. What do you think's going through his mind right now?
Oh, man. It's tough to watch. I truly struggle watching him play, and not because I think he's a bad player, because I think he does have some skill in there somewhere. But I mean, I know you see this. You've been around baseball a long time, but he is absolutely lost. He has no idea what to do when he's up there. He doesn't know what pitch to swing at. He's past the point of putting too much pressure on himself. I think that he's just up there in kind of a shell of who he was, and he's swinging at pitches that he shouldn't swing at. He's swinging through pitches that he should be hitting. I mean, this guy's hitting .061 in August, 2 for his last 33, and it's not just the numbers for me, because you can have bad numbers. You could be going through a slump like Vlad earlier on in the season. There was a very obvious reason why he was struggling. He just wasn't swinging at good pitches. He was swinging at sliders that were 2 feet off the plate. He was swinging at the fastball elevated out of the strike zone. And we could look at his at-bats and say, if Vlad wasn't swinging at those pitches, if Vlad had a better approach, if Vlad did this, if Vlad did that, he would be better. And he figured it out, and he is who he is now. You watch Davis Schneider's at-bats, and I know that Barker watches his at-bats every single day, and he probably thinks, how do I fix this guy? He's the guy with the at-bats where you kind of just, you're pulling your hair out, you're scratching your head. it's almost like you have the same feelings that he has. He looks miserable up there. He looks lost. He doesn't know what to do. And I've spoken with Matt Haig. I've spoken with Guillermo Martinez, and they're almost trying to figure it out with him, where guys are like, we don't know. We don't know if it's mental. We don't know if it's physical. We don't know if he even wants to be out there. It is tough to play in the major leagues when you're going through something like this. It's tough to play in the minor leagues. It's tough to play in high school. But when you have 40,000 people staring at you every single night, booing you off the field, following your every single pitch, it is almost impossible to pull yourself out of a rut like this. And I know Barker, I don't know if Barker's been in a rut like this. This is a pretty bad rut. But he'll tell you, it is really hard to do it at the major league level when you know you're on national television every single night, and you just have to feel for the guy because it's so hard to watch.
Yeah, and boy oh boy, if you're a right-handed hitter, and you're facing teams now. This is part of the issue, I think, too, for Davis Schneider. Yeah, you've got the Reds and you've got the Angels, but the Reds are still kind of in the wild card race. You're going to be seeing a lot of teams in September. I mean, they're not going to be giving away at bats to you. It's got to be, especially since it was such a good story when he came up, right? And we're all sitting here saying, wow, every good team needs to find a guy on the cheap, right? I mean, everybody does. You need that guy. And we're looking at Davis Schneider, and I remember thinking, man, if you can have a Davis Schneider, Spencer Horwitz platoon at second base next year, that's. But now I look at the guy and I don't know when the hits are going to come.
Yeah,
I just don't.
That's the thing, right? Like you think about guys. I mean, how many guys have had that kind of start? I mean, not like Davis Schneider, because his start was pretty incredible. But they start out hot. They start out hot for 6 months, 4 months, let's say, and then you never hear from them again.
Yeah.
Right? There's tons of those stories, right? Like I use myself as an example. In 2011, I had a 2.5 ERA, and then you really never heard from me again. I got hurt, I pitched poorly, and then that was it, right? Mm-hmm. Davis Schneider, let's be realistic. Davis Schneider could very well be that guy. There's a ton of those stories. Barker probably was a lot like that story, where he had some success and then you never really heard from him again. I was that story. And Davis Schneider, when you just look at him, I mean, if I can see that there's really no glaring issue, and he is just swinging through pitches and he's taking pitches that he should be driving, then maybe he's just not the player that he was early on in his career for those first 2 months. Maybe the bar was so high that he can't live up to the hype. He can't live up to the expectations. And I think that, is it too early to think that he's not the guy that we thought he was? I don't know, right? I mean, you probably talk about this more than I do. Is it too early to give up on him? I don't know. When I see him in the batter's box, he's, like I said this 3 times already, but the dude is lost. And when you are lost, whether it's on the mound or whether it's in the batter's box, it's really tough to watch, and it's incredibly hard to do that in the big leagues.
We're seeing Vladdy at third base again tonight. I think the Jays have been pretty open about where this is all going and where it might go. Would you be surprised if he's the starting third baseman come opening day next year?
No, I think if Vlad wants to play first, he'll play first. If he wants to play third, he'll play third. And I think he's an average third baseman, which is fine with his offensive numbers, and he's a great first baseman. I think if you give him reps at third base with the arm strength, with the athleticism, I think he'll become an above average third baseman. I've always thought that he is such a good athlete. And I know he doesn't look like an athlete, but if you really watch Vlad, if you watch him in the batter's box, on the field, play defense, run the bases, he is an athlete. And I think that he could play anywhere on the field. Maybe not catcher,
right.
But I think that if he worked hard in the offseason, if he worked hard in spring training, he could theoretically play anywhere on the field. And I mean, if I'm Vlad, if I want that big contract, if I want that $400 million contract, I'm probably sitting in John Schneider's office and saying, "Hey, man, let me play third base." Why not? And seeing what Ross Atkins thinks, seeing what John Schneider thinks, and I mean, he looks good at third base. I mean, you're probably more critical than I am when it comes to things like that. But I think he looks good. He's a solid third baseman. He's a guy
have no problem when the ball's hit to him. I really don't.
Right. As long as he's making that routine play, he might not make the absurd play to his left or to his right down the line in the hole. But as long as he's making the routine play and as long as he's throwing that ball across the diamond to the first baseman's chest, I have no problem at all with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. being at third base.
Oh my goodness, if Rafael Devers can play third base, Vladdy can. And you know, the other thing I think that also helps is, you know, not being able to shift as much as you used to. I mean, that kind of removes that from the plate, but also the fact that analytics have advanced so much that you can position a guy. Like I just. To me, the biggest thing would be, and again, the biggest thing for me would be making a position change in my final year before free agency, right? And which is more of a mental thing than anything else. And if Vladdy is happy with it, and he certainly seems to be happy with it, no, I'm with you. I mean, if I can get a Pete Alonso in here or whatever, knowing Vladdy, I'll play him at third base. I have no problem with that. I'll worry about. Listen, I've had run prevention coming out of the yin-yang for the last 2 years, and I've won jack squat. So I don't mind having to sacrifice a little run prevention, you know, if it's going to make my lineup better. And, you know, when Chris Bassett said the other day that he's happy with Vladdy at third base, my thought is, God, if Chris Bassett is happy, who the hell am I to complain about it?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I said that you're pretty critical about things like that, but I think Chris Bassett is more critical than you are. And you're right. If Chris Bassett says that he's okay with somebody playing a certain position, then hey, who am I to argue? Chris Bassett is a lot more critical than I am, especially with the defensive side of things. He wants that run prevention, and I truly do think Vlad is a very adequate third baseman.
Yep, I'm with you, Chris. Thanks for doing this, man.
All right, dude. Talk to you soon.
Chris Leroux, our Blue Jays radio analyst on Sportsnet. 7:07 will be the first pitch tonight. Chris Leroux and Ben Shulman with the call on the radio side. And, of course, the game will also be in the TV side. It's Joe and Dan tonight. I apologize if it isn't. I know it's Dan. But anyhow, 7:07 first pitch, Yariel Rodriguez against Nick Martinez. And a really good insight from Chris Leroux on Yariel Rodriguez and what the Jays need to see from him. And, you know, again, keep in mind, there's a uniqueness because of his contractual situation. The Jays do not have options on him after this year. So this was really the only year you could flip him down to AAA without having to put him on waivers. And that's why the development part of this year was so important to Yariel Rodriguez. And you know, Chris makes a great point. You know, we look at this guy, we look at the age and everything, but he is a major league rookie. And right now he's got an ERA under 4. Not bad. And if he can finish strongly, you'd have to think the Jays will feel really good about themselves going into the year. That's it for us. Fan pregame is next. I'll be back following the game tonight with Blue Jays talk. I will be back tomorrow from 4 to 6 Eastern with Blair and Parker. Have yourself a great day, a great night, I should say. Enjoy the baseball, and we'll chat again.